it started off initially with like, it was a purity movement. Initially, it was all about being pure. Remember, that's when people were not watching TV. They were not doing it. It was very much focused on setting yourself apart. And then we see the rise of neoliberalism across like the West. And then what you then see is then the prosperity preaching started coming. And then of course, come on, we are struggling in our continent in Africa. It's a fertile ground for prosperity. Yeah. Because you tell people who are suffering that, yo, don't worry about it. Your riches are in heaven. Yeah. And honestly, this is when I always say Karl Marx's idea of like religion being an opium for the people, because there's a promise of you getting all these riches in your afterlife. So of course, there's no way prosperity preaching was not going to succeed on the continent, because the people were struggling. Yeah. And it was almost like hope. Somebody's giving you hope. When you're absolutely right. You're even thinking about, of course, it's just something to hang on to, which is why people find it shocking that it's always, when you go on the continent, it's seemingly people that don't have much, but they're able to give it away, right? And they don't even bat an eyelid. Why? Because they know that they've been told, almost like if you give this, it will be multiplied. It's investment, honestly. And when you sit down, all the language that's used, I remember there's like a couple of sociologists who were saying that it's almost like it's an investment scheme, because people are being like, you're being told that you invest this much and you get tenfold. But what are you investing in? Even though there's nothing tangible, right? But you have this belief and you know that this is going to work, and you have nothing else to rely on. So of course you're gonna stake your chances, because it cannot get worse than it already is. So you might as well, somebody's giving you this hook, you would take it.
Yeah, and it goes back to why I said they need to be regulated. If they were regulated at all in places like Nigeria, I'm telling you, it would have been DOA, dead on arrival. Because it's a...
If you know, I mean, I don't want to mention the church, but of course there's this church which has been very controversial. It's been in the news and everything else.
Spark Nation, no?
Hey, Jude, Missy, I don't want to mention.
I have to mention it.
We just have to mention it, though.
At the end of the day, it's what it is.
And that, like, initially when it started, I remember, like, everybody was like, oh yeah, they're doing such fantastic work. They had all the young people flocking to it. And once again, what then happens is there's a whole, I feel like every day there's a new revelation. I remember the first time when revelation started coming out of young people being talked about being sexually abused. And I was like, okay. And then it just spiraled. And every single time there's been like something new and something coming out. And I think more recently, was it last week as well? Yeah. The charity commissioner and the thing shut down the church for money and for fraud. But one thing I will say is, even with everything, all the controversy that's happening around that church and everything else, people are still flocking. All they have to do is change their name and set up under a new, and people are still flocking. Church is still happening. I don't want to name the pastor, but the pastor is always on social media and people are still like bigging him up. And he's like, so for me, sometimes I'm like, even though we know all of these things, people are still going to these churches and they're not seeing anything wrong with them. So I'm just like, I don't know what it is, but once again, also on the flip side, I also know how that church operated in terms of like the reason why it specifically targeted young people from vulnerable homes.
Exactly, I was going to use that term, yeah.
Who didn't have good like parental support. Yeah. Which is why they were able to exploit them so easily. So once again, it's like, how do you then, what do we put in place in those instances for these checks and balances? Because typically, in those cases where you have young people, it's the parents that will step in and be like, absolutely not, you're not doing this. You're not moving into some church house. You're not doing this. But when that isn't there, like, what checks and balances can be put in place?
There are no checks and balances. The people should have become their own checks and balances. But like you rightly said, vulnerability. When you're bastardized already, when you're hopeless already, you're in a very vulnerable position. And you know, if you take advantage of vulnerable people, how the law can really hammer you here. Because at that place, you are at your lowest.
Of course.
And there's different stages of life where people can be vulnerable. It's whether you're getting married, whether you're out of a divorce, or you're falling in love, you're falling out of love, you're ill with mental health, you're broke, you can't pay your bills, you're homeless. These are the different times where you could become very vulnerable. And if I decide to, by virtue of my work, I know places where where young girls are being kept or treated for their vulnerabilities and ill mental health and all sorts. Yeah. If I decide not to go hang around there, and I know these young girls hang around there, and I said to them, I can give you weed, I can give you money, come home with me. I'm only playing on the vulnerability.
Yeah.
And they know that, okay, he's driving a nice car, he's got access to weed, he's got access to alcohol. They'll follow me because this is what they want. They're straight by barter. So it's the same with the pastors. Going back to what Abdul said, they're professional hustlers. The high time we know, but we're talking about the people that are so hoodwinked, people that are so bastardized. It's very difficult to drag them out. You know, if you go into these churches with the mindset of questioning things, then it's a different ball game. But if you go in there at your lowest, I've spoken to a friend before who said, God